welcome to yet another episode of Defeasible Reasoning. I'm Professor Andrew Rozema, reporting to you semi-live from the Grand Rapids Community College Center for Cybersecurity Studies Media Studio Department. Today with, as always, your internet friend and mine, Noah DeSmit.
Hello.
And our special guest for today, Dr. Jared DeMott, owner, proprietor, provocateur of VDA Labs, also professor at DSU, Dakota State University. Go Trojans?
Correct.
Former NSA Analyst. We won't talk too much about that. That's top secret stuff. And hire of Drew Rozema's graduates sometimes.
Yeah, thanks for what you do here at GRCC. It's great.
So one of the things we've been talking about at this first series of our podcasts is that thing that my students are apparently occasionally achieving to do, which is getting jobs in the field. And like, how do you get started? You and, dare I say, I are from a different time than these youngsters are coming up now. So our paths might be different than what's going on these days. But I was wondering if you could start us off with, what got you into computers first, and then what made you think about cybersecurity, and then what possessed you to get a PhD and write a dissertation on something, and how did that start?
Yeah, sure. No, I was always interested in tech. Definitely knew at a pretty, high schoolish young age that I wanted to go into engineering. Applied for the Air Force Academy, was accepted, was going to do aerospace engineering. My parents managed to convince me that I would die in a horrible death in an overseas war, which is kind of ridiculous because I would have been at a desk just like I am now. But
you'd have been designing planes and missiles instead of...
Yeah. Anyway, I ended up doing a bachelor's degree at Ferris, which was great. And then my first job out of college was at the NSA. So moved to the DC, Maryland area with my wife. And
let me stop you there. So what was that process like? The NSA just showed up in your Calc 3 class and said, hey, young man.
Yeah, actually, interestingly enough, I had a job lined up at State Farm. They were the ones hiring all the Ferris grads in the late 90s. They were kind of like the big IT shop. Yeah. And so I was all set to, take that. And at the last moment, a guy calls and he says, hey, I'm from Baltimore. You should receive a plane ticket in the mail soon, and we'd like you to fly down.
Like, just that spooky.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I've never been there. I mean, if you're really going to send me a plane ticket, I'm game for that. So he's like, yeah, you'll find it really interesting. I'm like, okay. And without knowing much more than that, I took the interview, which they promptly hooked me up to the polygraph machine. It scared the crap out of me. But they told me they'd pay for my master's and things like that. And it seemed, even though the monetary value of the job offer was less than the other, it was a hard decision at the time. I was like, do I take, $10,000 less a year but it seems like it's pretty cool. And I feel like I made the right choice because it was very interesting. I still have my TSSCI today, still, have some involvement in defense contracting and things like that. So that is...
Back it up for a second. TSSCI?
Top secret, yeah.
Clearance.
And SCI is just like another tick on top of that, like the sensitive compartmented stuff. So anyway.
So you can be read in on the really dark stuff.
Right, if needed. Although mostly we do, commercial contracts now at VDA. So, but we do still have some involvement in that space. So it's been something that's been great and kind of carried me in many ways. It was a great first step. Couldn't have asked for a better. So ultimately, all things work out together for the good.
We hope.
Yeah.
You leave Ferris, you go to the NSA for a while. Uncle Sam says, I'll pay for your graduate work. And there you go state?
No, I did a master's degree at Johns Hopkins when I was in the DC area. And that was good, yeah. So then eventually my wife and I had a child. We decided it'd be great to raise them in Michigan. So we moved back in 2005 to Michigan. And a year later, I think it was 2006, I started a PhD at Michigan State. Took me 6 years because I was working full time. So 2012, I graduated with that. And
you're not alone there, my friend.
It took a while to do that, but that was a great investment too, just in terms of really trying something different than kind of, the daily grind of code auditing or whatever it is you do, pen testing or gosh, we do so many different things. I was in Ida this morning and I got a call, from a local company about an incident that they want us to rush over and do some malware and IR and stuff right away. So, we're bouncing across, but slowing down enough to do a PhD at some point was great because they make you take a lot of mathy courses on machine learning and stuff that was really hard for me and a professor I barely understood and things like that. But it was a great experience,
Sure. So you mentioned Ida. We spoke with our friend Matt over at Grimm. He spends a lot of time in there too.
Sure,
he was telling me he prefers the actual compiled code to the source given the option. The machine never lies, I think is what he said quite ominously.
Yep.
That's kind of, as I understand it, one of the things you teach as well as like providing that service to folks who need their binaries decompiled and reverse engineered. That's I thought I remembered you teaching like a 700 level, super scary sounding, decompiling binaries for dummies who better not be dummies because this is going to hurt if they are kind of classes.
Sure.
So what's that course like? And then like, what's it like to teach at an exclusively online cyber focused Dakota? Yeah,
no, happy to answer that. Can I back up though and give some context to that discussion? Because that's kind of a down in the weeds discussion.
Not allowed.
So, when you think about, okay, if you want to be the best cyber company in the world, which we do, and you're kind of headed down that idea, what are the services you provide, right? And they fit into either, you can think of them in terms of the technical bits or the kind of people you take care of. So like on the enterprise side, you're either doing proactive, like security testing, or reactive, like incident response. On the developer side, you're either doing, sort of like training devs or AppSec or SDL-like activities, or you're auditing code or other things like that. And then there's other services as well, things like maybe taking care of VIPs. We had a guy who was being tracked on his phone, so we deployed some cool tech. And so there's that. There's training engineers, training other engineers and developers and students. That's kind of more what you were asking about. And then there's kind of more of the kind of law enforcement government side, of sort of whatever it is that they want done. If there's some interesting vulnerability research or something like that, or, maybe you would do that for other reasons too, but kind of down in the bits and bytes, which is what you were talking to Matt about. So, whether or not what his first point, is it better to look at bits and bytes rather than source code? I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that. I understand what he means because I've been in the world that he lives in. He lives in the world of, I'm just trying to find one cool bug, and I'll do that with IDA.
To defend him, that's primarily what they're paid to do, right? They get a binary from
that's
somebody.
That's what he's excited about anyway, just in general. So
if you could tell us though exactly why you hate Matt Carpenter, that would be great.
No, Atlas is cool, but
just kidding.
On the other side, if you're a developer, they don't see the world like that. They don't think it's fun that you're going to try to find one cool vulnerability and red team their thing. They spent 6 months or a year being creative and creating this whole new API and mobile app and something that syncs with a car. And we've done all that too, right? We've done projects with Auto and apps. And my guys loved it. We had a recent job where we got to work for Activision, hacking Call of Duty's Black Ops type games and stuff. So we got to game while hack. And they were like, this is literally my dream job come true. So, we've been involved in all those. But I see the world, I think, from a slightly broader perspective, which is, depending on who you're talking to, the developers would really look at code. Generally speaking, that's a better way to find more of the broader set, because they're interested in, let's find 95% of the bugs. He's interested in, I want to find one cool hack, that kind of makes my day and kind of, I can put a feather, it's a different focus.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It doesn't. And so like one of the things I think about in training the cybersecurity engineers of the future is that to me seems like kind of a pyramid, right? Like down at the bottom, if you look at the PCI top 20, like the top 20 things SANS says you should get done to defend your business. Like red teaming's not even till like 20. And like things like know the equipment in your facility and know the software in your facility and know, patching somewhere around 5 and, getting like, we don't have people who can do that stuff. And oftentimes what I hear from supposed experts who are telling us what we need to train people to do, it's like, you need to tell people how to like write assembly and reverse engineer binaries. And I'm like, if we could just get patches applied every second Tuesday of the month, we'd be winning all day.
Which is why I backed that conversation up before
I
answered your question, because I think it was important to make exactly that point. I think that was the point I was trying to make. I don't know if I made it. You probably made it better than I did.
Reiterate what people say. That's my jam.
Yeah, which is there's a whole spectrum of services. There's a lot of help. Cyber's an awesome field, and there's a lot of cool things in it. Regardless of your focus, you might get excited about training devs or, infrastructure or vuln scans, and they're all great things. And, you're right. As you move up kind of this pyramid of expertise, kind of exploit development and reverse engineering and in-depth malware analysis or kind of any sort of hardcore down in the weeds where you're spending your day and night, it's definitely kind of a more black magic voodoo ninja skill set, but it's not ultimately necessarily the thing that makes the broadest impact for society, right?
I'm glad you
Applying
said that.
patches and to your point, and the things like that, sometimes the basics, getting the basics right, like the 80-20 rule is sometimes actually more effective. And so we try to do all the above.
Gotcha.
So your company, which we've talked about a little bit already, how did that all get started? And you've mentioned a little bit all the services that you do, but what is maybe the high level mission and activities that you're involved in?
Yeah, what's your
day-to-day?
elevator pitch?
You put me on the spot.
So we just walked into the elevator, and I said, "Hey, that's a nice VDA Labs jacket you've got there. What do they do?"
I hope there's no investors listening. They might feel like I blew the 20-second pitch or something. But no, so
We can edit.
vulnerability discovery and analysis is VDA Labs, and basically the idea is we want to have this broad impact that we're talking about. So whether it's training people, we're at conferences like Hack in the Box doing malware trainings. We're at Black Hat doing an AppSec class. So whether it's more on the developer side, or more on, maybe like the Defender or Reactor side, maybe it's more on the infrastructure, IT security side. We want to have verticals of expertise across the board so that we can really make the world a safer place. That's ultimately our goal. We really want to do that.
That's a good pitch. I've been doing.
Now, can you measure that and tell me, did I hit 20 seconds? Was that the exact right time?
Be able to when he gets this into
Yeah,
an audio.
I'll just speed you up really fast, and we'll make 20 seconds happen.
Perfect.
The trick is you just reduce his pitch in accordance with how much you speed it up.
Nope.
Nobody will notice.
It's going to be really high pitched. It's the only way.
Chipmunk elevator pitch.
Chipmunk elevator pitch.
And that's what we do. No, that was really good. I similarly, like when I do the personal branding thing, my goal is to increase the cybersecurity posture of my students, my community, and my country. How's that? That's my
perfect.
current,
Dang.
It's perfect.
current pitch.
And they all fit well together, right? I mean, so you're kind of at the point of that pipeline where you're helping train people before they come work for VDA. So that's great. Like it's all hand in hand.
I've got some resumes I was collecting from students that I'll just pass on to you after we finish up here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We have interviewed employees, perhaps of yours, who have said that the work they do at VDA Labs is the closest thing you can do in the private sector to being a spy.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of work, that kind of penetration testing, like as a percentage, what do you figure of your work and then of the work in general that needs doing is like, Tank, I need an exit.
Best movie ever?
Probably.
I feel like an old man now that like, I talk to my students now and they're like, the what?
Yeah.
It was this thing with Keanu. I don't.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was this part where he like went through the metal detector and it was really cool. And
That was actually like the best 20 seconds of film or 20 minute and a half of film.
Yeah. I watched the making of that scene. It was really cool.
I bet. I've tried to get my students on board with the Angelina Jolie vehicle of the late 90s called Hackers. Like if you want a refresher on like how cool it was to have a pager that did text or rollerblading. Surprisingly, the rest of it holds up pretty well, but
I lost track of what the question was. You
we
derailed
way
us there. I'm pretty
digressed.
sure. Oh, it was
Pen testing. How much of it?
What's the percentage of? Like I said, honestly, we try to have this whole vertical, right? So we're not necessarily fixated on. We'd love to come out and train your developers or audit your source code for your new car, mobile app, IoT. It doesn't matter. We do occasionally where I'm just like, how do we get to do this for a job? Just the other day, we were asked to fish some VIPs. And so, the guys had set up spoof card on their mobile and they were they're getting paid to make prank phone calls is what it was. You know what I mean? So we're crank calling them and trying to get them to click on links and stuff that we'd already set up into this elaborate phishing scam that we devised ahead of time and things. And yeah, sometimes the red team side really is very interesting because of the sort of where else can you legally tail a CEO home and hack his personal Wi-Fi? Because we were hired and asked to do that. Like otherwise you go to jail for that, right? So
Right, yeah.
Pro tip, students, nowhere
don't do
else
that. Don't do that. Yeah. Pro tip, don't do that,
You live
please.
in a country with some of the worst laws on the planet. Don't do that.
Yeah, good point. I'd probably strike that.
I mean, if you've, if the CEO signed something when he got hired that said that's going to happen and the company signed something with you guys that said that's the only time you can do that.
You probably never visibly see the reaction of said VIPs. I imagine that perhaps it's people within the company who kind of bring the news of they failed the test to them. But maybe you do. And has there ever been some pretty negative reactions by VIPs?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And we record some of those calls and almost never, I don't think we ever have, share those with the ultimate customer, because what we don't want them to do is go play this in front of the person in some meeting and be like, listen to you sound like an idiot and fall for this scam. Like, what an embarrassing thing. So we don't do that. The
Man,
goal is
you are
never
dumb.
to, yeah, exactly. You are really dumb. The point is never to, you know, sort of go that way to sort of embarrass somebody. It's really to try to make that company safer. And we keep our eye on that ball, and we try to make sure that even the way that it's reported and handled is appropriate based on that.
Gotcha. So the one kind of topical thing, I knew you were going to be on the show, and do you ever try and read the New Yorker? I attempt to read the New Yorker from time to time. The problem is the articles are longer than my bathtub water stays hot.
You know, my favorite is an email called The Morning Brew. That's what I've been reading lately. Yeah, it's like just a one email a day news station, if you will.
Gotcha. The Morning Brew.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like you know, it's short and sweet, and they hit, you know, so let's say 6 or 7 things a day. And it seems like it's kind of like the other day they had, you know, look out Fortnite, here comes Apex Legends or whatever the new game is that's killing Fortnite. Yeah. So just, you know, and it could be more business news one day, or it could be a game thing the next, but it seems to be like I feel like it kind of keeps you relevant and connected to what's going on out there.
The thing I was reading, though, is this article by Adam and Ronan Farrow about private Mossad for hire. This was an Israeli deal. Their intelligence service, you know, the same as ours is in services is. They train people up, they do a job for a while, but then they go off into the world. And they apparently don't all wind up on the light side of the force, you know, like our friends at VDA Labs do. But some of them wind up running these companies that maybe aren't as scrupulous with the powers that they have. And I was wondering, like, what your thoughts, having been, you know, at least in some part, read in on some things over the course of your life and studied an area that has, you know, a particular set of skills, like that old man said in that movie. What do you, is that like a thing we should worry about? Because what winds up happening is we train up people, they get hired by a contractor. The contractor is working for an American company. The contractor starts working for a UAE company. All of a sudden the contractor has a room where the Americans sit, and then there's this room next door. And maybe the stuff happening in the room next door might involve Americans, but the Americans next door don't know about it. So that was the big article that broke like immediately prior to that. Is that cool? Should we be concerned?
Yeah, so I know all about that and have a lot of opinions. Kind of a complicated subject. Basically, it's kind of I'm trying to figure out how to get into this conversation without it being a 2-hour conversation. It is kind of complicated,
we can have
right?
You back.
Because it's not necessarily illegal, right? I mean, you think about it. If you want to start a company and you want to, you know, look for O'Day and some, you know, well-known product, and you want to publish that software product,
meaning the vulnerability that lets you break.
If you want to sell that to
whatever.
You know, anyone, but particularly a lot of people have what they call morals around that, right? Which I agree with. So, like, if you were going to sell that to a Western government, i.e., the U.S. government, some would say that's great. Do that. That would be helpful. That would help law enforcement conduct their mission when they're looking for online porn, child killer, predator, and they do. They use that kind of stuff to do exactly that. So there's a legitimate, useful law enforcement need for that. Now, other people say, well, what's the diff if I go work for Dark Matter at UAE? They're the ones that were recruited. They actually asked me, like, I think they reached out to everybody in the industry. They're like, will you come work for us? So they reached out to me too. I said, no, thanks, just because, yeah, that whole thing, I know exactly what goes on over there and stuff. But if you had said, yeah, like, I don't think that would be unethical, because you're going there knowing that you're doing a job for them. You're working as a cyber contractor, you know, reverse engineering software, whatever you do. When you're done with it, you pitch your result over the fence. You don't know what they do with that, and it's not your business, and they're not going to tell you. But at the end of the day, is that really unethical? Like, I don't know. Kind of, I guess, in my sense, because I have a U.S. clearance, I'd kind of, you know, shy away from it. But for somebody else who maybe didn't, like, well, I don't know that there's necessary, like, from their perspective, right? We do that too in the West, and they feel that it's their right to have that too, and so they can look for bad guys within the UAE too, or whatever, right? Like, so they don't see it as a worse, different thing than you might.
Right, and but their idea of a bad guy is Jamal Khashoggi, and my idea of a bad guy is picky terrorist.
Well, and I agree with you. So I agree with that, right? Their use of that may include, like, spying on U.S. journalists or something like that, right? And we don't agree with that. We think that's a really bad thing, and I totally agree with that. So I actually completely share your opinion. I'm just suggesting that, like any coin, there's two sides, and that if you interviewed somebody else from there, they might share a different opinion.
All right. Shout out to the nice folks at Dark Matter. If you've got any consultants you want to send to Grand Rapids for a little while.
Yeah. Let's start hiring their folks.
Yeah, turn the tables.
There you go.
Is there, to use the cyber nomenclature, is there perhaps a patch in the education component of training these people wherein they're not just learning about how to do these things, but they're also learning about maybe some of those morals and how to make those kind of decisions with their own best interests and the people around them, their best interests in mind? Or is it just way more complicated than that?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated because there's actual laws around exporting arms, like legitimate, like you can't ship 100 M16s from here to there or whatever.
Too. You can't ship anything over, what was it, 42-bit crypto?
Yeah, right. And so there's not the same exact sort of regulation around software. Because in one person's eyes, Microsoft Word and Adobe Ode, they're both software, right? They're both bits and bytes, and you can put it in a zip file and you can email it to somebody. It's hard to understand and explain the difference, and really even, So I think it's all about intent. Like if somebody were to take that and use it to do something unlawful, just like with a handgun or something, that's when the crime is committed, not when you purchase a handgun. You might be purchasing it because you like to target shoot or whatever. So I don't know that analogy is the best one. That's the one I hear the most. I think you could go down a lot of different analogy routes, but that's it's not
the Ode, it's the hacker. Odes don't kill people. Hackers
exactly.
kill people.
Basically true. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a somewhat fairish analogy, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I was just curious because, I hear Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about a way to fix some of our problems in politics and other realms in regards to science could be to better teach curiosity when folks are educated. And I didn't know if perhaps there was an equivalent, well, if we better taught this thing in education maybe, but I'm sure it's vastly more complicated than I can comprehend.
Well, and the tricky part here is that well-educated, thoughtful, ethical people can come down on either side of that issue. Like that's definitely one of those things where, you can firmly understand that this lawful government is paying me to do a job. I am doing that job and making a thing.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So even, for example, Christians and non-Christians, that wouldn't even necessarily affect how they view that issue, right? In terms of morality, because I think in that case, it's more specifically, if you used to work in law enforcement, you can see some value of it. If you never did, if you always worked for Microsoft or something, you would probably just think that's really bad. Why would somebody ever try to exploit the software that I
worked so hard to make?
Wrote so. Yeah. And so this issue, I think, is actually a fairly somewhat minorish. I don't like to get overly fixated on this particular thing because I think we can have such a broader impact by helping, companies secure their networks and product makers better make, safer products and with less vulnerabilities in general, and you would see less issues related to this. So I think there's a bigger, better way to kind of have a more positive impact on this than try to sort of get fixated on exactly how to regulate this industry or something.
But those make for boring podcasts.
I know. It's not nearly as interesting sounding as...
Got to get those clicks.
Cyber warfare or something just kind of has a better ring to it than AppSec, I suppose. But
so the other thing that the broader question that might be solved in the education space, particularly at a younger level, is the U.S. government decided that we're kind of not in the influence operations game at some point, unlike the Russians in the previous election, or those guys at I want to say it was Cyberpoint who were selling basically, we make fake personas online and make them say bad things about you for a fee, which is kind of, we've moved up a couple of levels of the OSI model and we're working on a different part of the stack, but just faking people out and tricking them into things that maybe we can teach around. I'm open to suggestions on how to do this because teaching people how to think critically about the things they're seeing online, that's a toughie.
Right. Yeah. No, there's definitely, I feel like in cyber, we do tend to walk a certain gray area at times that's interesting. Even what you were asking earlier about, does somebody get offended when they were the ones on the end of receiving a phishing call or something? They didn't sign up for that. Their employer signed them up for that. And then sometimes, to your point, indeed, they are rather miffed when they find out that was all a scam and they didn't sign up for that, and they can get a little PO'd about that. They don't feel good about that. They don't feel like that was ethically exciting, but it's a necessary part of security testing.
Totally
so it's kind
necessary.
Of interesting. We see those kind of sort of gray threads throughout our industry to a certain extent that we do have to walk very carefully.
I'm all about walking through the gray.
There's so many shades of gray.
Yikes.
Well, that seems to be about our time.
Perfect.
Thank you so very much for coming on. I hope you will come back if we invite you again later. Do you have anything other than this wonderful company? I've heard something about this VDA Labs, West Michigan's premier penetration testing and security consulting firm. Other than that you like to pitch social media wise? Do you have Twitter? Do you have Facebook?
Yeah, I'm easy to find on, not Facebook. I'm easy to find on Twitter and LinkedIn. Feel free to connect, say hi and whatever. So yeah, awesome.
Cool. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks
this
a lot.
Has been yet another episode of Defeasible Reasoning. Play the outro. Defeasible Reasoning is produced at the Epic Studios of Grand Rapids Community College Media Technologies Department. Epically executive produced by Noah D. Smith and hosted by me, Drew Rosen.